There are places where the earth concentrates its strength. This is one of them. When we look out on a landscape, we become as much a part of it as the cliff on which we stand. On these peaks, in these canyons, we touch the pulse of the living planet. We feel its breath upon us. And in these mountains, we embrace the unending task of learning to live rightly in the world.
In northern New Mexico, a range of mountains rises up from the high desert. A wild, rugged land of the Faraway Nearby. The volcanic Jemez Mountains are isolated from all other ranges. An island in the sky, surrounded by a desert sea. To walk for a time in this place is to bear the mind and heart into a particular space. An immensity of earth, sky, and time. This land holds the remnants of a resourceful agrarian society that flourished in an austere environment. A wet place in a dry land. And an epicenter of climate change in the desert Southwest. The center of these mountains is a slumbering volcano that once exploded in massive eruptions. Creating a plateau of volcanic ash welded into rock up to 900 feet deep. From the bottom of White Rock Canyon to the heights of the Jemez, the land rises more than a mile in elevation. Creating different zones of life as temperature drops and moisture climbs in the steep ascent from canyon floor to alpine peak. Bandelier National Monument is encompassed in this rise from the Rio Grande to Cerro Grande. In this high desert, the very crust of the earth is slowly pulling apart. Flowing into this gigantic rift valley, the Rio Grande is a linear oasis in an arid land. Colonizers of the emerging deltas and riverbanks in Bandelier are primarily cottonwoods and willows. They established firmly, spread widely, and a vigorous population of native plants has slowed the advance of the invasive exotics that plague so many rivers in the desert Southwest.
If we but look closely, we find that we fit into the patterns of the natural world. We live on the land and take our living from it. This is true, but the first truth is that we love the land. We see that it is beautiful. We delight in it. We are alive in it.
Between the river and the peaks lies the Pajarito Plateau, carved by water into an extravagant maze of canyons. The land appears to be wild and natural. Earth and its community untrammeled by humankind. It is wild, with most of Bandelier designated as wilderness. But a closer look reveals that the human presence is ingrained in the landscape. The entire Pajarito Plateau and Jemez Range are imprinted with signs of habitation. An ancestral home sacred to Pueblo people for more than a millennium.
Nothing is simple and alone. We are not separate and alone. The breathing mountains, the living stones, each blade of grass, the clouds, the rain, the beasts, the spirits of the air and water, we are indivisible. Nothing that any of us does but affects us all. We cannot pluck a flower without disturbing a star.
The high desert landscape evolved with fire, the forest's immemorial ally. Many plants depend on its frequent appearance. Because of a century of suppression, fires are now ignited by design, an effort to replicate a natural cycle, wondrous in its complexity. In winter, water leaps out of vapor and thin nothingness to array itself in form. Deep snowfalls are the primary source of water in this arid land. At the highest elevations lies an enormous caldera, the heart of the giant volcano. On the rim of the caldera and throughout the alpine forest, montane meadows are the most productive grasslands in New Mexico, creating lush habitats for an exuberance of life. Because of its isolation, this sky island is home to a number of endemic species that live only here, only at high elevations. The Jemez mountain salamander, lacking lungs, obtains oxygen directly through its thin, moist skin. Adapted to the upper reaches of western mountains, the American pika depends on cool, damp summers and insulating snowpack in winter. The high desert is intolerant of environmental error. Temperatures are rising inexorably and rapidly. Snowpack is diminishing. Unlike mobile species, which can shift their migration patterns, pikas and salamanders in the Jemez are already at the limit of their range. They have nowhere to go. Climate change effects have already materialized in these desert mountains, and on a massive scale. Trees grow slowly, but can die quickly. We are now witnessing the death of entire forests. In only 2 years, more than 90% of the mature piñón pines in the region died.
I believe we have suffered a psychic dislocation of ourselves in time and space. Do we know any more where we are in relation to the stars, the moon, and the solstices? Like the wilderness itself, our sphere of instinct has diminished.
Our planet is far from fragile. It has circled the sun for more than 4.5 billion years. Climate change poses no threat to the continuation of life on Earth, but it will determine which lives survive and how. Scientists call the time in which we are now living the Anthropocene epoch, a new stage in Earth's history in which the actions of humankind have altered the natural world. The dramatic forest death means the Southwest will be a different landscape in the future. Much of the pinon juniper habitat is returning to grassland, a savanna ecosystem that may be more resilient and better able to recover from the coming water famine as the planet continues to warm. Climate change is upon us. It is inevitable. But despair is not. Parks and protected areas can be living laboratories for studying long-term changes in the landscape. Abundant and extensive wildlands can help alleviate effects of a warming planet by absorbing carbon dioxide. And they serve as an angle of repose. Places for the pursuit of happiness. A respite from an apprehensive and congested world.
When I emerged into this wide world, there was a vast pulsing harmony in the canyon walls. I remember the embrace of the earth and the sheltering sky and the bright legend of my youth. Now, I am old. The years go their way, and through my life I have seen much of the world. But if you have ever been to the Canyon of the Frijoles, or walked the trails of the Pajarito, or felt the breath of the wind at Painted Cave, you will never come away entirely. A part of you will remain there always. You will have found an old home of the spirit. Our immense journey begins and never ends. We travel as far as we can. Even death is merely another step toward eternity. So let there be wonders along the way. Let the journey be made in beauty and belief. Let us learn to live rightly in this world.